Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and we've got some bad news for Tesla and the EV market. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. Let's start things off by going over some stats. And by the way, some of these stats come from Statistica and some of them come from Cox Automotive. And then we'll talk about why this is happening and what this means for the car market. So last year, Tesla sold 422,000 cars in quarter one 2023. That's huge. I mean, 2023, they sold 1.8 million cars. That is up by a massive margin compared to the year prior where they sold 1.3 million. And I mean, back in 2016, they only sold 76,000 cars. So to go from 76,000 to 1.8 million in just a few short years, I mean, that is impressive. But the growth is no more. 386,000. That is how many cars they sold in quarter one of 2024, down by about 10% compared to quarter one of 2023. Now, it's not just Tesla that's down. The entire electric car market is down by about 15.5%. So Tesla's 10%, right? The rest of the car market's 15.5%. So Tesla's doing a little bit better than everyone else. And so you hear that and you're like, okay, well, the car market's just down, right? This is a lot of the people that are all hyped about EVs. That's what they'll say, but that's not reality. Reality is the car market's up by about 5.6% year over year. So the delta between Tesla and the car market, right? 5.56% in the positive and 10% in the negative. That's massive. So why is Tesla struggling? Why is the electric car market struggling? And I want to have a real conversation about this. So I have talked to so many people over the last few months about the electric car market and why it's not doing all that well. And here's some of the answers that I've gotten. First one is tax credit. Oh, the tax credit situation in 2024 sucks, and so that's why the cars aren't selling. Well, first off, a lot of cars still qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. And for the cars that don't qualify, the manufacturers release a discount that equals $7,500. And something to remember about that tax credit, it only works if you owe $7,500 to the federal government. If you don't owe $7,500, then you don't even get to, take up all of that tax credit. And so that's the first part of it, is a lot of cars still qualify, and if they don't qualify, the manufacturers give a $7,500 discount that makes it so that they're in the same price range as cars that have the tax credit. The next argument that I hear from people is, the prices, they're too high. The electric cars are still too expensive. Tesla, right? Huge price cuts over the last year, and they definitely helped increase volume because, again, they sold 1.8 million cars last year. But despite that, right, they're obviously not selling well anymore. And I don't think that electric cars are too expensive as well, because the average brand new car is about $47K. The average electric car is just over $50K. And most of these electric cars are also kind of luxury cars, like they've got some nicer features. And so them being a little bit more expensive than the average brand new car, I think that it makes logical sense. So I don't think it's pricing. I don't think it's the tax credit. The next thing that people say is, the charging infrastructure, it's not good enough. And you're correct in saying that, but the charging infrastructure was not good enough back in 2020. It was not good enough back in 2023 when Tesla sold 1.8 million cars. I don't think that charging infrastructure not being good enough is a good enough answer as to why electric cars are not selling very well. And so now we're not left with that many options. And so the last option just comes down to the product. What is inherently wrong with electric cars that is pushing people away from buying it? If it's not the charging infrastructure, if it's not the pricing, if it's not, the tax credit, which also goes into that pricing category, then it must be the product. What is wrong with the product? And I think it's a couple things. So if we look just at Tesla, first off, build quality, right? That's always been an issue with Tesla, but it seems like people are, starting to be more and more upset about Tesla's build quality because it was okay 10 years ago when Tesla was starting up. But now that Tesla's been a car company for some time, it's like, why can't you just build cars that don't fall apart? Again, the battery and everything seems to be okay after a few years, but the rest of the car, like the suspension and you look at the interior, it just completely falls apart. I mean, I saw Tesla driving the other day where you could audibly hear it driving down the road because of how jacked up the suspension was. And so that's the first thing, with Tesla. But you look at the other electric cars, and there's some other electric cars that are seem to be pretty well built. I mean, look at Rivian, for example. So, I think that's an argument on the Tesla side of things, but I don't think it's for the rest of the EV market. So I think the big thing just comes down to utility. Electric cars do not provide the utility that the average American needs. And here's what I mean. So again, let's pretend that we live in a world where charging infrastructure is a lot better than it is today. You think, okay, that's perfect. That's all we need, and electric cars will work. I still don't think they would work in that world. Like if we had charging infrastructure at every single gas station that we have, people would still want to buy ICE cars. Because what you can do with an ICE car is you can go out into the middle of nowhere and you can take some extra gas with you and you have no worries. Whereas you cannot do that with an electric car. And a lot of you might be thinking, that's not important. Most people, they just go, A to B between home and work and maybe the grocery store. And that's true. But there's a difference between what people do and what they want to do, right? It's kind of like in the mindset of people here in the US that, the ability to go on adventures and to, have like some level of freedom, right? Vehicles, I mean, they literally are like the representation of freedom, because if you have a vehicle that's equipped properly, you can drive pretty much anywhere, right? On road or off road. And electric cars just don't go with that. What do electric cars feel like? Electric cars feel like being trapped. You might be more efficient, but you still feel trapped because of the range that they have, but also based on, how the charging system works, right? Because again, like I just said earlier, I can get a bunch of gas, put it in the bed of a pickup truck and go out in the middle of nowhere and have enough fuel for quite some time. I can't just go and pick up an extra battery pack and take it out into the middle of nowhere. I can't just take a charging station, put it in the middle of nowhere. So there's just not as much utility there. And you pair that with people continually having bad experiences in winter with loss of battery. And yes, I understand the heating packs in electric cars have helped out quite a bit. I just don't think they've helped out enough. But you also pair that with charging infrastructure just constantly failing. And you pair that with blackouts and all the other stuff that happens here and there. I mean, it just takes one negative situation for a person to never want an electric car again. I mean, one situation where a person's stuck on the side of the road because their car died, or, they can't get a charger, or they're trying to charge it at home and it doesn't because there's a blackout and then they're stuck and they can't get anywhere. It just takes one of those situations for a person to, again, never want to be involved with it again. It doesn't have to be a string of bad luck for a person. And so I think that's the biggest thing going against electric cars. I don't think it's the cost. I don't think that it is how the cars drive. I think it just comes down to the fact that they're electric. That's the problem with electric cars. I know that might sound like a ridiculous answer for some of you, but for the people that don't want to buy electric cars, I don't think that's a ridiculous answer. I think that, most people want something that's more efficient, but they want something that's more efficient within reason to be able to meet their needs. Again, here in the US, where we live in a huge country, wide open space, to where they're not going to get stranded. So let me know what you guys think about the situation. Let me know if you think if this is just a blip and electric cars are going to go up. I'll see you.